Well, good morning. This is the Ja Renee, and this is the Ja Renee Healing. I've got a lot to say, so I'm just going to cut to the chase. So I apologize that I am going in and out. Um, Not going to make excuses, just going to try to be better. But I am back, uh, and as promised, we're going to jump right into the next gospel. This gospel is called Origin of the World. On the Origin of the World, excuse me. And it's one of my favorite gospels because for me, it it helps set the tone for what everything else you need to know is about. Kind of as in the previous videos when we spoke about the two different gods they were describing, and we spoke about the lesser god. Um, this gospel pertains to that lesser god. Um, and so I just want to go ahead and let's start reading. So this is what they've headlined as before the beginning. Since everyone, the gods of the world and people, says that nothing existed prior to chaos, I shall demonstrate that they all are mistaken, since they do not know the origin of chaos and its root. Here is the demonstration. How agreeable it is to all people to say that chaos is darkness. But actually, chaos comes from a shadow that has been called darkness. The shadow comes from something existing from the beginning. So it's obvious that something in the beginning existed before chaos came into being. And that chaos came after what was in the beginning. Now let's consider the fact of the matter, and in particular, what was in the beginning from which chaos came. In this way, the truth will be clearly demonstrated. In a nutshell, I guess the way that, the way that we've kind of thought, uh, things to kind of spark or things to kind of been created was kind of formed from a chaos, like from something happening, a big bang, or something that was disruptive. No matter in what way that you're seeing that disruption, or you want to kind of label or describe that disruption, it's chaos. And what's being said is that, okay, we're never saying that the chaos doesn't exist, but we're making it very clear that something existed before the chaos. Okay? And so, after the nature of the immortals was completed, out of the infinite one, then a likeness called Sophia flowed out of Pistis with the wish that something should come into being like the light that first existed. So I'm going to stop there because I've read this before. And so I know that for me, when I'm trying to understand things, I like to reread it for that understanding. And so it's very possible that maybe you didn't pick up what was said. But it was talking about a being that existed in this immortality that existed before the chaos. And her name was excuse me. Her name was Sophia. Now, as a side note, Sophia is known as wisdom. You can do your own research on that. But that's just a side note. She's wisdom. Uh, and what wisdom wanted to do, what Sophia wanted, was to create something like that being, that infinite one that she saw. That one was the one that existed before the chaos, but that's the one she was looking at and wanted to replicate. And she did it. But we'll proceed. Immediately her wish appeared as a heavenly likeness with an incomprehensible greatness. This came between the immortals and those who came into being after them, like what is above. It was a veil separating people from the things above. And I'm gonna say I've been getting choked up since reading this. It definitely seems like something doesn't want me to be able to get this out, but I most definitely will. So what she wanted, when she said that she wanted to create something that was like what she saw, immediately it appeared right in front of her. And where it was birth, or where it says this came between the immortals, which we know where the infinite one, where Sophia was, and those who came into being after them, which I'm assuming they're talking about us, but I'll proceed. And it was a veil separating people from the things above. So the way that it's almost being described, and stick with me, is heaven, right? So what they just said was that when she created this being, it almost became this entity, this great, this incomprehensible, let's see what they said, this incomprehensible greatness. It appeared, excuse me, let's back up. There we go. But it appeared as a heavenly likeness with an incomprehensible greatness. And just like how I was explaining how it's comparable to heaven. And it's the way that he's being described is almost described as the actual heaven as we know it, being a veil that separated people from the things above. So there's a lot of times when we talk about heaven, we'll point up, right? We don't know why we point up, but we point up. Although, we've been told that maybe heaven isn't so much of a place, but a state of mind, or, that it's just not as we're thinking, like, oh, there's not a heaven up in the clouds. But the way that this is describing it, whether if it's something that should be decoded for an actual understanding of what's being said, it certainly sounds like a heaven above. But I'll proceed. Because it said it was a veil separating people, me and you, from the things above, the immortals. Now the eternal realm of truth has no shadow within it, because the immeasurable light is everywhere within it. When something is the truth, okay, the truth, oh, that's the most powerful, the most sacred thing. There's nothing that can penetrate. Ain't no dark, ain't no shadows within it. It is what it is because it's the truth. And this is what it's describing. Outside it, however, is a shadow, and it was called darkness. From it appeared a power over the darkness, and the powers that came into being afterward called the shadow the limitless chaos. I'm going to read that again. From it, okay. Outside it, however, is a shadow, and it was called darkness. From it appeared a power over the darkness, and the powers that came into being afterward called the shadow the limitless chaos. So if the shadow was called the limitless chaos, and we already have understood that the shadow was darkness, we now are seeing the connection between chaos and darkness, and also understanding what darkness is in relationship to truth, and what truth is in relationship to darkness, because clearly there's light in truth if there's a shadow that's called darkness on the outside of it. What happens when, I mean, come on now, we can look and see what happens when you turn on a light. It's explained right in front of us. And so this is why this is one of my favorite gospels, because it just makes so much sense to me. And it explains so much. I don't know if you're like me, but I was somebody who loved to wonder, loved to try to question what's what, and hope to be able to figure it out. And this was this was very life changing. Um, but I ain't gonna keep you from the story. Let me go on. From it, every kind of deity was brought forth, one after another, along with the whole place. Consequently, the shadow, darkness, too, is subsequent to what was in the beginning, meaning he's subjected to him, meaning you don't own nothing, partner, meaning the one from the beginning is your boss. Okay? So, hope you keep that in mind. But let's go on. The shadow appeared in the abyss, which derived from pistis. And pistis is faith. And so you can look that up as well, which is derived from pistis, whom we have mentioned. The shadow perceived that there was one stronger than it. It was jealous, and when it became self-impregnated, it immediately bore envy. So what we just heard was that the darkness knew it knew it didn't create itself. It wasn't the absolute being. It was literally created. Which, as a side note, it's okay to be a created. You don't, you know, we are not the one, It's okay. But the fact that we can identify and say that we are connected to the one, that we came to the one, that we're listening and adhering to that one from the beginning, that's everything. But it doesn't seem that the darkness understood that. And because the darkness didn't understand it, it became jealous. Bless his little heart, man. Because instead of the darkness accepting its position and accepting who it was and what it was, it bore the jealousy. And as another side note, okay, no, let's just no side note it. Okay. Since that day, the principle of envy has appeared in all of the eons and their worlds. But envy was found to be an aborted fetus without any spirit in it. It became like the shadows in a great watery substance. So pretty much that jealousy, that that darkness exuded had nothing of value in it, right? It had nothing of value. It was nothing. It was void. It was worthless. And because it was worthless, it was found to be like an aborted fetus without any spirit in it. And it kind of circulated within, like it became like the shadow. So you have jealousy and envy that's now becoming like darkness, you know? And as I'm explaining these things, and I know it's strange, it may be a little strange to hear certain things that we speak of so casually referred to as a being, like darkness, like jealousy and envy, you know, like faith, like wisdom. But I think that that's for us to understand that we're mistaken. We've been mistaken in our understandings and how we see and how we view things, because these are 100% absolutely beings. And so then the bitter wrath that came into being from the shadow was cast into a region of chaos. Since that day, a watery substance has appeared. What was enclosed in the shadow flowed forth, appearing in chaos. Just as all the useless afterbirth of one who bears a little child falls, likewise, the matter that came into being from the shadow was not cast aside. Matter did not come out of chaos, but it was chaos existing in part of it. So let's just talk about the elephant in the room here. Did they just describe kind of like the birth of the origin of the world as a birth, and the waters, the because of what Sophia did, because of the creation that she made, and it becoming matter, because she didn't create something that was like what she saw, although that's what she wanted to do. She didn't, that's not what she did. She created something else. And the what that she created was physical, was matter, was something now that you can see, now that you can touch. And its birth of that brought forth waters. We know a water, you know? And so it's very interesting to see how we can understand how things came forth, because a lot of times you have people trying to get down to the nitty gritty and finding out and seeing, I want to put my finger on it, I want to find out what happened. Science. However, there's some things you just can't explain. There's some things that you just need to know, that you just need to have faith about, that you have to just simply understand that it's something exists before you. Period. Once you understand about that true one that exists before you, it all falls into place. Now we're 20 minutes in. I really hope that you're enjoying this and I'm not boring you. But I am just going to read a short segment of what's left. We'll, of course, come back to it and do the rest at another time. Sooner than later, of course. But now after these things happened, Pistis came and appeared over the matter of chaos, which was cast off like an aborted fetus, since there was no spirit in it. For all of that is a boundless darkness and water of unfathomable depth. And when Pistis saw what came into being from her deficiency, she was disturbed. Because once again, Pistis is an immortal being, faith. But again, Pistis and Sophia are almost hand in hand, right? Which is why they're speaking about Pistis in the same way, like interchangeably, as they are with Sophia. So I just wanted to pick that up, point that out, because I don't want you to be confused. So when Pistis saw what came into being from her deficiency, she was disturbed, and the disturbance appeared as something frightful, and it fled to her in the chaos. She turned to it and breathed into its face in the abyss, which is beneath all of the heavens. Sounds like she sent him to earth. The abyss, beneath all the heavens. I mean, think about how we even think, how the process of how our mind even goes to when we think about heaven, and they're sitting here explaining it here, Now, when Pistis Sophia wanted to cause the thing that had no spirit to be formed into a likeness and rule over all matter and over all its powers, a ruler first appeared out of the waters, a lion-like in appearance, androgynous, with great authority within himself, but ignorant of whence he came into being. She's describing the being that she just created. For those that don't know, androgynous means that it was both male and female as one. We talked about that in the Adam and Eve videos. But he was ignorant. He had a great authority about himself, but he didn't know anything. What good are you if you know nothing? So that's a side note. Find something out. Know something. But when Pistis Sophia saw him moving in the depth of the water, she said to him, "Youth, pass over here," which is interpreted as Yaldabaoth. And since that day, the first principle of the word that referred to the gods and the angels of the people appeared. And the gods and the angels and people constitute that which came into beings by means of the word. Moreover, the ruler, Yaldabaoth, is ignorant of the power of Pistis. He did not see her face, but he saw in the water the likeness that spoke with him. And from the voice he called himself Yaldabaoth, but the perfect ones call him Ariel, because he was like a lion. And after he came to possess authority over matter, Pistis Sophia withdrew up to her light. Yo. So I'm about to say something that um you may not agree with, but I ask you to let it sit within you. Um, do your own research if you can, but what they just described was the birth of who we call Satan, who we call the devil, how we identify the devil. This devil that we keep speaking about, that's what they are talking about. Because they're talking about the ruler of the world. The ruler of this world is Satan, is what we know to be Satan. He is the God of this world. Now, of course, he has no real power, but he is running rampant within it, and able to affect people and affect the minds and instill chaos, okay? Because what is it that we see and we experience every single day? So before you tell me that Satan doesn't run this world, you explain to me what all this chaos is about. But I digress. It also it keeps talking about him being ignorant, right? It talked about him being this kind of showing this great authority, you know. Um, and if you don't know who you are, honey, you're blind. You don't see anything. And one of the things that we've come to know is when we talk about Satan, the devil, we would say he's arrogant, he's ignorant, and he's blind. And what we just described here was all of that, you know. And so I am going to stop there in terms of the reading, but I do want to just encourage not believing everything that somebody tells you, right? Just taking it in because that's what everybody believes. So why not? Of course it has to be right, right? No. It's usually not what you think. Seek it until you find it, and until it's like, oh, okay, I'm able to draw those connections. I'm able to see how one and one makes two. You know, we just told a story about a being that we talk about utilizing every day. When we call on wisdom, when we want to use wisdom, and wisdom in this time, it wasn't I guess the best type of wisdom to use, because you may have different types of wisdom, um, but you always want to use the best wisdom. You don't want to use um, any type of degrading wisdom, any type of things that steer you in that direction. But she created a being, and she immediately, when she saw it, when she understood, she she was almost horrified, you know. Um, but she expected it to be like what she was used to seeing, and she did it on her own. There's a being that existed before her, and she decided that she wanted to do something and did it, and that's what happened. And one of the things that I love about this story is that that is something that we do all the time. We know that there's a being that exists before us. There's things that we want to do. And instead of kind of consulting with that higher power, that being, to figure out if it's something that we should do, we tend to just make a decision on our own, just like she did. And what we end up doing is creating beings unlike what it is that we truly want, because we haven't consulted with the one that can give it to us, with the one that can ensure. It ain't mad. But I'm gonna get this out.